In the flickering glow of my desk lamp, amid scattered sketches and unpaid bills cluttering our cramped Rusthaven apartment, I watched Alani's small hands bring a fantastical circus to life on paper, her giggles piercing the stale air while a persistent itch nagged at the edge of my awareness, like an unspoken murmur from within. The town's decay seeped through cracked walls, a constant reminder of deferred dreams, as I scratched absently at my arm, dismissing the faint warmth spreading beneath the skin as just another symptom of the polluted haze outside. Mornings blurred into routine, her laughter pulling me from sleep. My days pieced together with freelance gigs that barely covered rent, and nights spent hunched over my own drawings, chasing shadows of what could have been. Yet, in those quiet hours, as fatigue settled like dust, I'd catch fleeting glimpses of something shifting just out of sight, a subtle ripple under the surface that I'd blame on dim light or weary eyes, rubbing it away with a shrug before it could take root. One evening, as Alani and I sat at the kitchen table with her homework tales of enchanted forests and mythical beasts spread out, that nagging itch in my forearm flared again. The overhead bulb cast long shadows across the cluttered surface, where crayons and notebooks mingled with half-eaten snacks. Alani, my 8-year-old daughter, was engrossed in her drawings, tongue poking out in concentration as she sketched a dragon with wings like shattered glass. I tried to focus on helping her, suggesting more color to make the creature's scales shimmer, but the sensation in my arm was impossible to ignore. It started as a subtle tingle, like pins and needles after sitting too long, then deepened into something rhythmic, almost alive. I glanced down and saw it, a faint pulsing like shadows dancing just beneath the skin, tracing the blue veins webbing my forearm. The skin there seemed thinner, translucent, as if something pressed up from inside, testing the barrier. It was nothing, I told myself. Just a muscle twitch from too much time hunched over my tablet at work, designing soulless ad campaigns that paid the bills but drained my soul. I rubbed at it absent-mindedly, feeling warmth spread under my fingers. But instead of relief, unease seated deep in my gut, making me flex my fingers to shake off the sensation. They curled and uncurled involuntarily, as if with a mind of their own. Alani looked up then, her bright eyes catching the movement. "Daddy, why are you scratching like that? Is there a bug?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity. I forced a chuckle, ruffling her hair. "Nah, just an itch, kiddo. Let's finish that dragon before bedtime." But as we continued, the pulsing grew more insistent, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine, resounding in the quiet kitchen where the clock ticked too loudly, marking time I suddenly felt slipping away. That night, sleep evaded me as always. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood, but my mind raced with unfinished tasks and gnawing worries about piling bills. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation, its blade slicing through moonlight filtering through the blinds. The itch in my arm had become a burning sensation, demanding attention and shattering any hope of rest. It felt like fire ants burrowing under my skin, relentless and invasive. In the dark, I clawed at it desperately, nails digging into flesh and drawing thin lines of blood that glistened in the faint light. That's when they emerged. Tiny figures, no bigger than ants, crawling from enlarged pores along my veins. They spilled onto my skin like dark liquid from a broken pen, shadowy and indistinct at first. But as they gathered, they took shape in horrifying detail. They formed a grotesque circus, acrobats contorting their limbs at bone-snapping angles, bodies twisting like pretzels of sinew and nightmare, clowns with faces melting like wax, grins stretched too wide, eyes hollow pits staring into my soul as they juggled droplets of my own blood. The tiny orbs glistened red under the moonlight, tossed between minuscule hands with eerie precision. Horror choked me, a cold vice around my throat. I couldn't scream or move at first, paralyzed by the impossibility. This had to be a hallucination, a fever dream from questionable takeout or the exhaustion of single parenting since Amaya's accident 2 years ago. I slapped at them wildly, my palm smashing against my arm with frantic force, convinced it was all in my head. They scattered like cockroaches under light, diving back into my skin through the same pores, vanishing as if they'd never been. But as they retreated, sharp pain lanced through me, radiating from arm to chest, accompanied by a murmuring compulsion in my mind. Feed us. Sustain the show. The words weren't audible, but resounded in my skull, a chorus of tiny, insistent voices that made my head throb. Shaking, I stumbled to the bathroom and flicked on the harsh fluorescent light, which buzzed like an angry insect. My reflection in the mirror was gaunt, eyes wide with terror. I bandaged my arm tightly with gauze from the medicine cabinet, wrapping it so securely that it throbbed from restricted blood flow, then collapsed back into bed, denying it all. The sheets were damp with sweat. I pulled them over my head, willing the night to end. But sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of being buried alive in a sea of writhing shadows. Morning came, and the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window did little to dispel the dread clinging to me like fog. Alani noticed my distraction over oatmeal, her spoon clinking against the bowl as she stirred absent-mindedly. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and coffee, a mundane anchor to an increasingly fragile reality. "Daddy, are you okay? Your arm looks funny," she said, her wide eyes piercing me with that childlike perceptiveness that always caught me off guard. The bandage was bulky, stained faintly with blood that had seeped through overnight. I forced a smile, though it felt like a grimace, and ruffled her hair again. "Just a rash, sweetie. Work stress getting to me. That's all." She stared at the bandage, mirroring my own obsession from the night before, her small brow furrowed in concern. It twisted my protective instincts into knots, this fear that whatever was happening to me could somehow touch her, taint the innocence I'd fought so hard to preserve since losing her mother. I changed the subject quickly, asking about her school day, but the unease lingered, a shadow over our breakfast routine. By nightfall they returned, more insistent than before. The house darkened early under gathering storm clouds, thunder rumbling in the distance like a warning. Alone in the living room, with the TV droning a mindless sitcom, I felt bulges ripple under my skin like a puppet show awakening. The pulsing grew stronger, visible through my shirt sleeve, as if tiny performers rehearsed beneath the surface. The murmuring compulsion returned. "Feed us." Louder, more demanding, hooking into my thoughts. I resisted at first, gripping the couch armrests until my knuckles whitened, but the pain built into a searing heat, beading sweat on my forehead. Finally, I gave in, pricking my finger with a needle from Alani's sewing kit, and watching in terrified fascination as a bead of blood welled up. The figures emerged, swarming the droplet, their tiny mouths latching on like leeches. As they drank, the spectacle escalated into cannibalistic dances, figures devouring each other in a frenzy of limbs and screams I could almost hear, reflecting my deepest fears of self-destruction, of failing as a father, and crumbling under the weight of it all. At work the next day, while illustrating bland ads for toothpaste and car insurance, I hid my arms under long sleeves despite the stuffy office air, wincing through pain I blamed on cramps to anyone who asked. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow over cubicles filled with the clack of keyboards and the murmur of phone calls. Colleagues noticed my pallor and the way I flinched at sudden movements, but I brushed it off with forced laughter. Too much coffee, not enough sleep, I'd say, waving them away. Inside, though, the compulsion gnawed at me, the figures stirring restlessly, demanding more. Home was worse. The familiar warmth of our small apartment now felt oppressive, the walls closing in. I snapped at Alani over spilled crayons on the living room floor, my voice sharper than intended, and watched her flinch and retreat to her room with wide, hurt eyes. Guilt crashed over me like a wave, but the murmuring in my mind drowned it out. "Feed us, or we'll take what we need." The horror spread insidiously, first to my legs, where the pulsing began as a faint throb in my calves, then to my torso, each vein a stage for their macabre performances. The skin itched constantly, a map of raised lines I scratched raw in private moments. I resorted to razors on hidden flesh, sneaking into the bathroom late at night to make shallow cuts on my thighs or stomach, letting blood flow just enough to appease them. The sharp scent mingled with steam from the sink as I watched the figures lap it up, their shows growing more elaborate. Tightrope walkers balancing on threads of my nerves, fire breathers exhaling plumes that looked like smoke but burned like acid inside me. Each feeding left me weaker, dizzy, vision blurring at the edges from blood loss. I grew pale, steps unsteady, but pushed through for Alani's sake. Online, in the dead of night, with my laptop's glow casting eerie shadows on my face, I discovered tales of vain parasites cursing failed artists like me, those who traded dreams for stability only to be haunted by manifestations of repressed creativity. Dark web forums described them as blood performers, entities that fed on regret and demanded sacrifice. But there were no cures, only tales of madness and suicide. Paranoia gripped me. I avoided mirrors, terrified of glimpsing the pulsing veins reflected back, a living tattoo of my torment. Nightmares plagued me of joining their eternal circus. My body contorted into impossible shapes, performing for an audience of shadows, while Alani watched, screaming. Alani's questions about my new tattoos amplified my guilt as her fingers traced the raised lines on my arms in a rare moment of closeness. "They look like snakes, Daddy. Are they magic?" she'd ask, her voice full of wonder, but it only deepened the chasm between us. I pulled away, claiming tiredness, though I truly feared contaminating her with this curse. The breaking point came at the local fair, a whirlwind of lights and sounds assaulting my senses. The air hung thick with the scent of cotton candy and fried dough, laughter and screams mingling from the rides. Amid Ferris wheels spinning like giant eyes and clowns with painted faces mocking my inner horrors, they sensed the spectacle and raged within me, a storm under my skin demanding a flood of blood. My veins throbbed visibly, the figures pressing against the surface as if trying to break free and join the chaos outside. Panic surged. I fled to a dingy restroom at the edge of the grounds, the door slamming behind me as the fluorescent bulb flickered overhead. Locking myself in a stall, the graffiti-covered walls closing in, I slashed deeply into my thigh with a pocket knife I'd started carrying. The pain, a white-hot explosion that nearly made me black out. Blood poured, and they swarmed out, feasting in a frenzy that left me slumped against the toilet, vision swimming. This couldn't continue. I had to flee town to protect her, to isolate myself before the madness consumed us both. But then, during a hug that evening as I tucked her into bed, her small arms around my neck, I saw a subtle movement on Alani's arm, a faint ripple, like a shadow under her pale skin. My heart stopped, terror surging through me like ice water. Were they spreading? Had my proximity infected her? The thought was unbearable, a knife twisting in my chest. I kept her home the next day, claiming illness to the school, barricading us in the apartment with drawn curtains and excuses. I tried starving them, refusing to feed, willing them to wither. But the pain exploded, welts swelling across my body like boils ready to erupt, my skin vibrating with their furious protests. The apartment filled with my muffled groans, the air heavy with tension as Alani watched cartoons, oblivious but sensing something wrong. The doctor's visit offered no solace. The waiting room was sterile, filled with the coughs of strangers and the flip of outdated magazines. He prescribed creams for what he called dermatitis. But scans revealed nothing. No parasites, no anomalies, just my word against the clean images. "Stress-related, perhaps," he said dismissively, his pen scratching across a prescription pad. Home remedies, salt baths, herbal poultices only enraged them, turning my body into a vibrating chorus of agony as the figures lashed out with spasms that left me writhing on the floor. Flashbacks to my childhood haunted me, vivid and unrelenting. I'd been left in a bug-infested attic by neglectful parents, feeling eaten alive by fleas and spiders that crawled over me in the dark, their bites a constant torment. The memories amplified everything, blending past and present into a nightmare where I was forever the victim, trapped in my own skin. My sketches, once an outlet for creativity, became obsessive depictions of them, pages filled with twisted acrobats and melting clowns, drawn in frantic bursts late at night. Alani found them one afternoon, hidden under my bed, and praised them as cool monsters, her enthusiasm a dagger to my heart. "You should make a book, Daddy," she said, but I snatched them away, burning them in the sink, the smoke curling like the figure's exhaled breaths. In desperation, I confided in Adrian, my old painter friend from art school. We met at a dingy coffee shop on the edge of town, steam from our mugs rising like ghosts between us. His eyes lit up with that wild gleam he got when discussing esoterica. He spouted occult nonsense about blood rituals and ancient curses on those who betrayed their muses, suggesting a ceremony to bind them. Inspired, I attempted a candlelit ritual in the basement, flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls as I chanted words from a dusty book he'd lent me. I pricked my palms, letting blood drip into a bowl, but it only worsened the spread. The figures multiplied, their forms turning violent with acts of dismemberment that mirrored my fracturing mind. Now, they demand my life force for their grand finale, the murmuring a constant roar in my head, or they'll tear through in public, starting with Alani. My veins pulse, a living stage throbbing under my skin, drawing stares from strangers in the grocery store. In desperation, I rented this secluded cabin deep in the woods, telling her it's a vacation to escape the city noise. The drive was tense, trees closing in like sentinels, the radio crackling with storm warnings. The cabin is rustic, creaking with every gust, isolated from the world. Scalpel in hand, pilfered from a medical supply store, I cut into the active spots under the dim light of a single bulb, pain searing as they fight back with spasms that contort my limbs. Blood flows freely, staining the wooden floorboards, and they emerge in a swarm, reforming from the puddles into larger, more coherent shapes. A ringmaster now leading the troop, whip cracking in tiny bursts that sting my nerves. I cauterize with a lighter, the flames hiss and the smell of burning flesh filling the air, but they reform, resilient. Alani peeks through the cracked door, her scream piercing the night like a siren. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Her face is pale, eyes wide with terror. I drag myself outside into the dawn light, the first rays piercing the canopy, the air crisp and biting. They disintegrate in the sun, shrieking silently as exposure weakens them, retreating deeper into my body, still stirring in the shadows of my veins, waiting for the next act. The pain ebbs, but I know it's temporary. The show must go on, and I'm running out of ways to keep the curtain from falling on us both. As the hospital lights buzzed overhead, sterile and unforgiving, I woke to Alani's small hand clutching mine, her eyes red-rimmed, but fierce with that unyielding love only a child can muster. The doctors called it a psychotic break, self-inflicted wounds from delusions, they said, prescribing pills and sessions where I nodded through talks of buried trauma. But I knew the truth. The performers had retreated, scorched by the dawn's unyielding light, their grand finale thwarted in that blood-soaked cabin. Weakened, they lay dormant in my veins, faint echoes of movement stirring only in the quietest moments, a reminder that exposure had been their undoing, not destruction. We returned to our Rust Haven apartment, where cracked walls and scattered sketches waited like old ghosts. Piece by piece, I rebuilt us, framing the ordeal for Alani as a nightmare spawned by Daddy's stress, one we'd conquered together. In the aftermath, our bond deepened. We sketched side by side at the kitchen table, her laughter drawing me back from the brink, as it always had during mornings blurred by routine and deferred dreams. My art evolved into abstract circuses of writhing shadows and contorted forms, born from the horror I'd endured. They sold, at last, granting stability without forcing me to conceal the scars webbing my skin like faded blueprints of a curse. Yet, vigilance became my shadow. I donated blood regularly to dilute any resurgence and shunned dark enclosures, letting sunlight flood our days as a ward against the itch that sometimes flickered at the edge of awareness. As I reflected in the glow of my desk lamp, amid those same unpaid bills and half-finished drawings, I understood the performer's origin, a family curse, veined through generations of abandoned artists like my parents, manifesting as parasites that fed on repressed guilt and isolation. Confronting them openly had starved their power, teaching me to embrace the warmth beneath my skin rather than dismiss it as polluted haze or weary illusion. But one evening, as Alani and I sat sketching her fantastical circuses, dragons and monsters dancing under big tops, I noticed a detail in her latest creation, a tiny, contorted acrobat, limbs twisted at impossible angles, mirroring the horrors that had once pulsed in my veins. She giggled, adding color to its melting face, oblivious to the chill rippling through me. The show, it seemed, might yet find a new stage, murmuring from within her innocent lines, waiting for the light to dim. And in the quiet of that night, as her pencil danced across the page, I felt the first faint twitch beneath my skin, echoed, I feared, in hers. Hey guys, it's Malice here. I really appreciate you sticking around until the end of the story. I'm a one-man operation and trying my best to grow, so if you like what you just heard, please leave me a like. Subscribe if you want to hear more, and please send me any reading requests you might have. I'm always struggling to find new content. Thanks again, and stay scared.